The executive order that Trump has been speaking about. I'm just really interested in your perspective.
I think our special guest today is Monica Gilroy, the founding member and managing partner of the Gilroy law firm. Monica has been named as a top 50 woman attorney in the state of Georgia. The headline kind of stops your heart if you're SFR related, but I think when you dig a little deeper, I think it's not necessarily as bad as it seems. Again, there's no outright prohibition. That's not what they're signaling. I learned how to fire people really quickly. I was responsible not just for myself and my family, but for all these other families too. So one of the biggest lessons I learned during that time was decisiveness. You cannot be afraid to make a decision. You have to make your decision and own it. Decisiveness is not a ugly or bad thing for women. It's actually very empowering. Tonya's heard me say this a million times. Every new year, I always say, you're going to keep on learning something new every day. And it may not be in my space right here, but maybe about something else.
Hello, my name is Mindy Seegar. I'm co-host of the SFR She-Suite and also Executive Vice President of Strategy and Business Development at First Rate Field Services. We are so excited to welcome a special guest today that Tonya is going to be introducing. I'm so excited about this guest and also the topics that we're going to be talking about today. One of those topics is the executive order from President Trump. We really want to have some good conversation about that and how it affects the industry today.
Yes, ma'am. I'm Tonya Odell, guys. I am also the co-host of the She-Suite with my friend Mindy Seegar here, and I am the RVP for ePremium Renters Insurance as well. I cannot wait to have our special guest on today. To your point, Mindy, I'm going to give her an introduction and then tell a little story about when we first started working together. And without further ado, our special guest today is the great Monica Gilroy. Monica is the founding member and managing partner of the Gilroy law firm here in Atlanta. For over 33 years, Monica's national law practice has been centered on real estate litigation and assisting property management companies, brokers, and owners with all aspects of their business. And now she's the general counsel of the Atlanta NARPM chapter and also the outside property management council nationally for all of NARPM, which is a really big deal. And I love that for her. As a subject matter expert, she also works closely with property managers, lenders, other real estate companies, handling their litigation issues, fair housing issues, and working to create all the protocols to prevent the issues from happening in the first place. Monica has been named as a top 50 woman attorney in the state of Georgia. How awesome is that? Monica is a national speaker and educator on property management, real estate, and related litigation topics. So we are honored to have my dear friend Monica Gilroy here with us today. Oh, gee, sweet. Welcome, welcome. Yeah. So happy to be here, ladies. Thank you so much. Love it. So I've probably known Monica, I guess, for about 15 years now. And we first started working closely together about 2014-ish or so. I was working for a property management company here in Atlanta, and we started doing, I was leading up their PM company acquisition, like division for them, or I guess just a process. And Monica actually helped us. She was the attorney, which if you've ever done that, man, is that important. She wrote all our agreements and analyzed everything and all that. But what I discovered, that's something, if you know me and you know this industry, the PM company acquisitions is something that's so near and dear to my heart, because after working with these companies for so many years, being able to provide them an exit strategy that is respectful and, really values their worth and, all the effort that they've put into building this company over the last oftentimes 20, 30 years. It's just something that was personal to me. And so being able to provide them an exit strategy that met all of their needs, I don't know, you just leave feeling really, really good. And Monica, you don't always associate things like that with an attorney. Let's be honest, compliance, you're like, whatever, all they care about is the contract. But I found in Monica, like, the essence of that, of it mirrored my same, I guess, just reverence and respect and, just genuine care for those property management companies through that process. Like, she wanted them to benefit as much as I did and more than anything you could put in a contract. So, I think that's what really started our friendship, was like, she's always about what can I do for you and how can I help you, all the people that we love and care about during this industry, and not just what's in it for me and when you're going to use my law firm and all of that. So,
Nice.
anyways, she's a special person.
Thank you. Well, it is so nice that you're on board here with us. Finally, I remember the first time I met you, which is not very long ago. Monica, I knew I wanted to have you on the SFR. She's sweet.
Thank you. Well, I just have enjoyed getting to know you. And yeah, Tonya, I echo our cherished friendship of all these years. You're a truly special person and you play such an important role in our industry. So thank you.
So glad you're here. And I wanted to kind of open up and really get into some key topics. And the one that definitely is at the top of everybody's mind is we really want for you to shed some light on and get your unique perspective on the executive order that Trump has been speaking about. Wanted to get really as much information as we can about all the different aspects and things that you see that this is going to affect, and talk more about what's consistent, what's not consistent. I'm just really interested in your perspective.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, I think it's important to remember that, this all sort of started this idea of, quote unquote, Wall Street, buying houses, as a result of the terrible Great Depression. I broke off from a really big law firm and started my law firm, in 2007. And so as I was talking to someone earlier today, I am a survivor of that. I am still standing, but we know that the havoc it wreaked, for so many consumers and Americans. And so the ability to have large, well-funded organizations come in, start like in Georgia, for example. I worked with all of the sort of the players you would think of to help them acquire property on the courthouse steps through foreclosures. We have a very fast foreclosure process here in Georgia. They were really providing something that wasn't out there, the capital to actually put houses back out there for individuals who had been displaced to get back into it. So I think that, when we read something like this with the title of Stopping Wall Street from Competing with Main Street Home Buyers, that's really not what it is, in my opinion. I don't think that's really the sort of the issue that is trying to be addressed. It's more, I think, just trying to put up some guardrails and some really, for them, unfortunately, just some more red tape and things that are going to have to be done, because it's not an outright ban. It's not. It just creates a lot of different little nuancy things that need to be done. And some of them aren't overly offensive to me, like the fact that there could be, FTC oversight for antitrust reasons. That doesn't offend me or anything like that. Probably the parts, though, ladies, that made me a little nervous was the very first part where, these definitions, right? And one of the first thing that we're going to see and we'll be on pins and needles for will be in the next 30 days, I guess 30 days from the 20th. What are these definitions going to be of first single family home, right? And then more concerning to me, large institutional investor. And the reason why I'm real concerned about large institutional investor is that as part of what I do for a variety of trade organizations and clients is I deal regularly with EPA lead-based paint investigations, which have just been explosive over the last few years because we had a change in some of the frequently asked questions that basically at the end of the day require two things. One, it requires all property management companies to be certified in lead-based paint remediation, which they never were before, but it also, where we used to have safe harbors as property management companies, or anyone doing property management or anyone, whether it's in-house or third party or maintenance, you suddenly were losing that ability that if you hired someone with a lead-based paint certification to do the work, they were on the hook, not you as the individual or the company hiring them. Those are gone now. And so one of the things that I've been working very closely with, I've actually had an opportunity to go to the EPA, both in Washington, D.C., and sit with our political groups. I've also had conversations and long discussions with the more career EPA about how can we put some of those frequently asked questions back? And one of the key things to that is, well, who really was this meant to target, right, in lead-based paint? And literally, I'm writing it as we speak to try to provide it back to some of the industry lobbyists who will then go back to EPA. And one of the things I was trying to define was the phrase large institutional investors. I'm like, right, that's I'm like, I need to stop and pick another word. So I'm just going to be very curious to see how that's defined. I mean, to me, and when you look at sort of the directive of the EO, it's the way I describe it, maybe in simple terms, is you're talking about companies that own, manage, all in-house, right? That we own it and we manage it. Where we have our other sector of the property management, community that are true third-party managers. So my thought is that I think this still is going to affect, right? The purpose of this is to approach and be focused on companies that own, manage all internally, right? Like the common ones we can think of, the larger ones, versus what I work with in some of the other groups of true third-party management. So probably, ladies, the number one thing is going to be, well, I'll need to hop back on in, approximately 27 days to see what,
Right.
or 20 days to see what's going to happen.
Well, I know you've been involved, greatly in legislation of, at the local, state, actively lobbying at the federal level, et cetera, and in DC. What do you think, like, how much involvement do you think in that decision anybody in this industry will have, or do you think it's none?
No. I'm anticipating. I had an opportunity to listen to the previous podcast that Everezi did, and obviously David Howard is an industry leader who is going to be obviously taking I'm sure great leads on that. Will there be input from the boots on the ground? I would hope so, because again,
Yes.
the idea here is, again, it's not blocking what the larger companies are able to do. It's just creating, some barriers for them. But I think that there'll be input. I mean, for example, one really good example of needing some input just from a practical perspective is towards the end of the EO. It talks about that if you're in the Section 8 space, right, that you have to disclose, the property managers themselves, right, whether it's internal or third party, have to disclose the ownership, right, just to find out who. So if you're third party managing for, quote, a large Wall Street, however we're going to define large institutional investor, part of that mandate, right, is going to be that you have to actually provide that information as part of the process. So, those of us in the Section 8 space, we've got to be thinking about, okay, what will that look like? Will that be another block on the form, or, what will happen in that regard? I do think that the specific carve out of the build to rent is super important, because I think that build to rent is such a valuable and really, in my mind, the most focused industry right now on really trying to, in fact, provide these resources, these homes for other people. And again, it's not that anybody's taking away from an individual homeowner. I would submit that it's the stepping stone to homeownership to be able to have these properties for people to be able to get into.
I couldn't agree more. And the more properties we have that are accessible for people of all economic backgrounds, the better.
Absolutely.
Everybody needs somewhere to live. So whether you're renting, you're owning, you're somewhere in between, you're Section 8, whatever it is, the more homes we can provide to our, fellow Americans, the better off this industry is as a whole. And I think we've done a pretty darn good job of that.
Yeah, I think I don't, and that's why part of me thinks we just have to, as these things begin to roll out, first the 30 days, and then within 60 days of the EO, that's when we have to see. So I'm reading. That's why I'm looking down. The Secretary of Agriculture, HUD, VA, FHFA, they're having to kind of figure out, okay, the way I'm reading this, what is going to be, to what extent are those entities going to be, are those agencies going to be allowed to help with, the bigger companies' sales, purchases. Like the way I read this, it'll be interesting to see how, the GSEs, Fannie Freddie, how that's going to ultimately interface with this. So I do think this is actually I think it's very interesting, and I don't necessarily know that it's bad. I think we just have to see what it looks like. And again, to me, my first little antenna went up with the definitions only because I think it could drop over into a variety of other spaces, fair housing, lead-based paint, and who knows where else. So that's why we all need to be, no matter what size we are, whether we're one home or we're 10,000 homes or 100,000 homes, we all have to be aware of this and keep our eyes on it.
Yeah,
I
and
agree with that. I think it's really important that we have a definition so that we then can figure out how to navigate through this so that we can provide affordable, safe housing for everyone in America.
Definitely. I agree.
agreed. And it's the stepping stone to, what we were I know Mindy and I've talked about this before with our beloved Gregory Frank, the founder of Everresi. One of the big goals of Everresi is to create standards, across the board, across whether it's institutional, builder, and or third party management across all of SFR. And I think the timing of this is really imperative for that. One definition, although it's a very, very important definition, it just signals every other industry has standards, but we need them here. And I think that'll really sort of catapult that effort to, okay, let's all the decision makers within this industry, we've got to get together and, kind of carve out what those standards are and what good looks like and what great looks like and what needs a little work looks like, so that we're all dealing with the same language.
Absolutely. So yeah, again, I think it'll be, I mean, again, the headline kind of, stops your heart if you're, SFR related, but I think when you dig a little deeper, I think it's not necessarily as bad as it seems. Again, there's no outright prohibition. That's not what they're signaling. It's clearly, that's why the finished product, I think, is going to create, like I said, more steps and more things. But I think for non, institutional property managers, just being aware that this will absolutely affect you as well in terms of Section 8 management, disclosures, and then we'll have to see how else it potentially affects you.
And I think it's really important that anyone in the industry, us as an industry, we have the opportunity to participate in the definition, in setting those standards, because we are the experts. We do this every day. And I think it's important that we make sure that we interject ourselves into this so that we can help provide an adequate definition and adequate standards. Because we don't want them doing that for us, especially if maybe they're not as well versed because they're not in the industry like we are on a daily basis.
100%. I agree. Yes.
Yeah. And now, so Monica, I know you're looked to as the expert, whether it's fair housing, legislation, lead-based paint, HUD, all the things when I think of over the years, the classes that you've given and all that. But I'd like for our She Suite squad to hear a little bit about what happened before you were the expert, right? As a woman within this industry, before you were on your own, like what did that look like for you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm very, very proud of the fact that I've been a trial attorney this will be my 34th year come May. And that, I just can't believe that I've been doing this for this long. But when I truly tell you I love what I do, I always have. And people that know me know that the thing I really hate to do actually is I hate to run my business. I love being a lawyer, but I hate when there are days when I have to do paperwork or, look at taxes and things like that. So I was very fortunate to come from, I've only had, I am my fourth employer. So I'm very proud of that. I came out of law school and went to work for a wonderful man here in Metro Atlanta that literally did anything that walked in the door. I mean, truly anything from criminal to domestic to workers' comp. And I learned very quickly that while I loved to be in court and be an attorney, certain areas I hated criminal law, the one and only case I handled. I was so, my client was caught red-handed. This will date me. She was stealing cassette tapes and literally drove out of the parking lot. The cassette tapes fell on the ground, so it'll date me. But I was so nervous, and the judge out there in the county that we were in, it was very southern. It's very southern here in the South. And he just looked at this little blonde girl, and he said, "Now, honey, you didn't mean to take those cassettes, did you? And you don't need that and that." And basically, she got off practically scot-free. And I just went back to my boss and said, "Never again." And then the domestic stuff just made me absolutely, I was depressed. I'd come home and it was terrible. But that was excellent training for, I knew I wanted to be a trial attorney. And then that boss became a judge, and he wanted me to take over his practice. And I said no, because my husband and I at that time, we didn't want to move to that part of Metro Atlanta. So the next man I worked for was another wonderful mentor, and he was a trust and estates attorney, and I did all of his litigation. Fascinating stuff. Again, some families fighting, but he also did real estate litigation, and that was sort of my first entry into, people fighting about land and title and all of that. I then got a wonderful opportunity to move to a large, currently it still exists, not in the same name, but it still exists in principle, one of the largest default firms in the Southeast, representing creditors, so banking, so tons of title litigation, representing huge property management companies, huge real estate companies. I was for a while, and I was the litigation group, but for a while, I actually handled out of the Atlanta office all of the bankruptcy litigation across the whole country for Fannie Mae. That was one of the jobs my firm had. So myself and a team literally air traffic controlled all the litigation. I would fly sometimes to different states. And that was really my first experience in really that big firm culture. And I had a mentor who I love and adore and think of as a second mother, of a woman who at the time had been the youngest partner in that firm. She was a named partner. And I owe so much to her for the opportunity she gave to me. And it was only when things started happening at that firm that caused I was a partner, and a number of us, we had to leave because of some of the things that were happening. So in April of 2007, myself and the female partner that ran the closing division, Georgia is a closing attorney state, we split, and we split this big, the headline in the paper was "Big Firm Splits in Two," and there we were, our little fresh-faced selves, and we split with 10 or 11 offices and 150 employees. I had a newborn baby, and my husband had just come off of being critically ill and in the hospital for 4 months. And suddenly I was my own boss. And ladies, I did not set out to be my own boss. That's not what I thought, but I found myself in that fashion. So that really was, that was now, next year will be the 20th year of that. And I've learned a lot of lessons from that time. Happy to share those with you. But I have loved the ability to have worked for myself. It has allowed me to be the brownie mom and the mock trial coach of the high school for 15 or however long it was, 10 years, and to always go on the field trips. And I will, my husband and I have always said that, yes, I probably could have made a tremendously bigger, larger amount of money if I'd gone downtown, but I would never trade all the abilities I've had to be a mom, a wife, a friend, because of the independence that having your own business allows you to have.
That is really good to hear. Gosh, they tell us we can have it all. But my goodness, when you're trying to juggle being a mom, education, schooling, and work, something has to fall off the plate at some point. So it's really amazing that you were able to juggle all of that. And I'm sure it was a stressful time. But I wanted to see if there were some things you could share with us about some challenges that you had along the way, maybe some things that our audience can relate to,
Sure.
and how you were able to navigate through it. And make sure
No,
I can,
yeah, no, I can share some for sure. I mean, again, remember what I just shared is that here's 150 employees, right? In May of 2007. Okay, so we know what happened next. We had the Great Recession, and it was a nightmare. I mean, it was, closings fell away. My litigation group, which was not a lot of people, was basically taking care of everybody. I learned how to fire people really quickly. I'm the best firer around. I know I had it down to a key, but I've got all these leases.
Everyone remember that.
Yeah, for real, for real. That movie Up in the Air with George Clooney? I mean, literally, I have got it down to a T. I can tell you how to do it first thing in the morning, just cut to the chase. But it was a very, very precarious time because, I was responsible suddenly, not just for myself and my family, but for all these other families too. So one of the biggest lessons I learned during that time was decisiveness. And I cannot stress enough for women in business, not just women entrepreneurs, but women in business and women in this industry. You cannot be afraid to make a decision. You cannot hand wring. You have to make your decision and own it. And if you later need to justify it to your employer, your client, your partner, be ready to do that. But we have good gut instincts. Women as a gender have excellent second senses, right? You know when something's going to happen. You can see the thing's going to fall off the counter and hit your child.
Yep.
You have to go with your gut. And decisiveness is not a ugly or bad thing for women. It's actually very empowering, but it is critically important. So that bad time period really taught me just to be decisive, that I had to just kind of make decisions, own it. And honestly, it's not that you're being mean or not caring about others, but you've got to be thinking very holistically about what is this going to mean. So that's probably the number one lesson. And the second two that the second one I would say is I was faced with just a terrible time as we were coming out of the Great Recession, kind of when I started doing a lot of business with our friends, our big institutional friends, our American Homes for Rent and Invitation Homes here in Georgia. Unfortunately, my law partner was diagnosed with a grade 4 brain tumor, and it was an absolute tragedy. I am very, very happy to say she's still with us. She's an absolute medical miracle, and we're so happy for her. But at the time, she had tiny little children, and this was she and I in this company that we had founded together. And unfortunately, her illness created some really great challenges and difficulties in ways that you can't imagine. And one of the things I realized is that we had made a terrible mistake at the beginning of our business by we were an LLC, a limited liability company, but we had 2 managers. And someone had said to us when we started the company, a 2-headed monster can't run a company. So all the advice I always give to not just women, but anybody opening up their own company is there has to be a decision maker. Even if you each get 50-50 part of the profits, somebody needs to have that 51% to make decisions in the event that some emergency like what happened to us happens. You've got to have someone who can act and do what they need to do. The other thing that we learned that was very, very important was, and again, you don't think of this, we were very young. I was in my late 30s. She was in she barely was 40. But luckily we had insurance. We had what's called key man insurance, and it's to insure the key players in an organization. If you are listening and you are a small business owner, if you are a medium business owner, having the proper insurances in place, just of all kinds, it made a humongous difference as we tried to navigate ourselves out of this situation. And so after her illness, it was just me. It was just me by myself. It became the Gilroy firm. And, that's sort of the lesson I learned from that very challenging time period was, I had to be the boss. I had to be driving the ship. The liability was on me. And that realization that you can do it as a woman in business is very liberating. And I really, Tonya knows this, I love teaching and speaking, but I also mentor young people. And especially if a young woman, a lawyer, comes to me and says, what can you tell me? I give all sorts of advice, operational. I personally have not experienced any discrimination or anything like that, because I think I just don't know that exists as much as it did even when I was a very, very young lawyer. I'm old, in the 90s. I didn't see that ever, I mean, even in the South, in little tiny counties, everyone was very respectful, but we just have to always.
Because you're so awesome, Monica. That's why. Because no self. You're so pretty.
Well, but
everybody's such.
it does exist. It does exist.
No, I know it.
But I guess the point is that mentoring each other and supporting each other as women in business is just critical. So that's what this is. to have like this podcast come at us, not just with good, up to date and current events, but also just some relatability to just the differences that women in business have. I mean, we wear so many hats, we have so many things on our plate. So, to me, I just, once I was away from that very troubling time, I just really haven't looked back. I just literally haven't looked back. And it's the thing to do. You just keep looking forward, take lots of deep breaths, and, surround yourself with good, loyal people, which I have been so privileged and honored to do. The property management perspective came into my practice about 22 years ago, when at the big firm that we split from, I met a lovely man in our NARPM and SFR world, Robert Locke, who is an absolute institution and a cherished member of our NARPM community. He is truly one of my best friends. I am proud to call him that. But he had a large portfolio, and that's how I cut my teeth. And it was him that brought me in and got me this bizarre, niche property management practice that has grown over the years to include the ability to represent small property managers all across the country, our big friends, our Wall Street friends, and everything in between, in all sorts of things that are there. And so as an industry, it's just such a fantastic place for women in business. And I've just been so honored to been a part of it and continue to be a part of it.
That's an awesome story. There's pieces of that I didn't know, and I love hearing that. So it's funny. It's almost ironic. I took the time the other day to write down some words. I haven't done like a 2025 post or anything yet on LinkedIn, and my goal is before January ends to do that. But one of my big words for me for 2026 is be more decisive.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If you were to say, Monica and I meet for lunch sometimes, if you were to be like, where do you want to go? I'd be like, wherever, where do you want to go? And like, why don't I just say, I'd like to go to Brookwood Grill around 1:00. Does that work for you?
Yeah.
It could be that small, or just, bigger decisions too. Obviously, I think as women, we do have those gut instincts, right? And you have to trust those. I can't explain where they come from, but we all know that they exist. Some of us have them at a deeper level, but the decisiveness, I think, is something that is really needed.
Yeah.
And it gains so much respect within the industry. And I know for me personally, I respect that so much in another female when they are able to be very decisive, and then have, it's not like when I make a decision, I don't have good reasons for it, or facts or research or something like that. But oftentimes, I'm not going to lie, my first reaction will be to be more like, just, whatever. I'll just,
Yeah.
And then when you're like that, somebody says something and you end up putting in way more effort or work, or doing something that's out of your character or strengths, categories and all that stuff. It just doesn't set everybody up for success the way it does if you could just be like, this is what I'm good at. This is what I want to do. This is where I want to eat, So anyways, that was a long-winded story, but I like the decisiveness analogy that you said.
Yeah, no, and I really do. And I think that, when you start kind of embracing decisiveness, it liberates you. It really does, because it allows you to dictate the path you're going to go on for your business, for your work, what you're going to do. I mean, even something as simple as I cannot anymore deal with the fact my knees hurt. I've got to do something to, take off some weight or do what you need to do, or I've got to make a decision about what I'm going to do about that client that isn't paying fast enough, or that is behind, or I've got to make a decision about what do I say to that employee that keeps coming in late or not doing their position. And it's always that thing where you hear about doing the hard things first. I mean, I admittedly, right, am procrastinator. There are days where I wake up and I'd much rather just scroll and see what's going on in the celebrity world. And I'm like, no, you have to do what you need to do. You can do it later. But when you become decisive, especially in business, those that are around you see that. They feed off of it. And you're elevating yourself in the eyes of your clients, your customers, your staff. And it just makes people view you that much differently. But it is something that you have to consciously do it. I get it. I really do.
I think as women, and starting from a very young age, we're conditioned to play nice and get along. And so we interpret that as it kind of causes us to be indecisive because we're wanting to consider everybody in the group without making a decision. And we think we're being nice, which we are. But it sets us up for failure, especially in the executive world because, and the professional world, because we're waiting for everybody else's input before we make a decision. And that's good, but at the same time, like you mentioned, Tonya, it adds all this energy that's necessary for everybody's input, and then nobody's making a decision, and it almost causes chaos. And so it's important to be able to balance, okay, grabbing input from others and working well with others, but at the same time, especially if in your leadership position, especially it comes to play where you do need to make a decision.
Right. And being decisive doesn't have to be bossy. Like,
Mm-mm.
ladies, like, and I think it's so often grouped together. It's not selfish, it's not bossy, it's not, but it's something that I definitely over the last couple of years have really worked on with myself. And I'm not where I need to be, but it makes me feel so much more confident in those moments. And I'm able to execute something, so much better when I made a decision for myself and then I just move on, and to your point, Mindy, it's not like you're being less considerate or not considerate of anybody else's feelings or
Right.
thoughts or anything like that. But I think too, for like the younger women in this industry or like the up and comers, that's a big, I would say that's a big insight that I would, share with them. If like the quicker you can get to that moment of decisiveness, and when you're decisive, if you making a good decision does involve considering the other people you're working with, what they're good at, all the elements that are at play, right? It's not just what Tonya wants and what's going to make Tonya the most money or look best or anything like that. Making a good decision includes considering all the elements that that are around you or that are involved in that decision. So,
And like, for example,
sense.
decisiveness doesn't also need to just be limited to us. Like one of the things I did early on as an attorney, one of the things I did early on as an attorney is give my staff, because we're trial attorneys, right? So we're in litigation, settlement authority, right? So if one of my paralegals is trying to, fix a problem, right? And, rather than the client spending $10,000 on my fees, they could settle with this person for $1,000. My attorneys had levels of authority where they didn't even come to ask me or the client, because obviously if the client somehow disagreed, okay, then Monica would pay the 1,000. But I've always instilled that in my staff, which is like a way of passing it forward, is that, we know practically if we can solve something, right? And you just need to give somebody in the organization permission to do it without having to come back. That's another form of decisiveness that makes things operate better and it allows you as the leader to do top down. It also promotes leadership from within. We have so many wonderful, really, really smart people. And that's the thing I just love about our industry is that these are some really smart people, and everyone is business savvy. You don't run into anymore, because I've been doing it just like you guys a long time. We've seen the evolution of this industry. We've seen this go from, much more kind of on the street. I hate that phrase mom and pop, but we can visualize what that means.
Right.
And it's now, whether it's 100 houses, 1,000, or 100,000 houses. These are business driven people. And to succeed in business, right, having your staff be able to have ownership and make decisions, right, giving them that ability to be decisive and make a good judgment call. That's tremendous, like giving to your property managers the ability, as an owner of a company, the ability to cash for keys if you can't get the tenant out, right? Yeah, you have authority up to $750 just to do it without coming to bug me. I'll be over here working on this. I'll be over here. You go do that. That's probably, I think, one of the best ways I learned kind of quickly that in order to run a company of a certain size, you just can't be in the minutia. To this day, I spend a great part of my day taking the gazillions of emails I get, and I flip them. No, nothing. It's just a signal. When I flip it to that person, they know I'm not dealing with it. They need to, right? And that's as basic as that is, but it makes a tremendous difference because then you're working collectively, but I'm empowering them to problem solve and do what they need to do. And, I just think it's a great tool in business to take kind of some step backs and say, okay, I don't have to run everything, right? I don't have to be the boss of everybody. And obviously, my stories about the corporate ownership and structure is different, but just from an operational perspective, giving others the ability to just do their jobs, that's huge. That's going to lead to success automatically.
Yeah, empowerment is huge in every aspect of life. I feel like it's like as a mom, like knowing when to allow your kids to make their own decisions and stuff, and it allows them to start learning that decisiveness, like word of the day, I feel like. Um, but and I think about being on like sports teams or at the sales teams and stuff like that. When somebody's like, Tonya, what do you think we should do? You just feel so empowered is a great word. You feel so much more confident. Oh, I get to contribute to the decision. And, kudos to you, Monica, for seeing that early on, like as a leader, because it allows your team to start realizing how to make a decision, right? And what factors to what we were talking about earlier, like what factors to start considering as they're making those small decisions, which allows them to make bigger and bigger and bigger decisions, in a better way. Well, I'm glad we solved the world's problems today. Related.
That's what we'll do. There's a lot going on. The lead-based paint stuff, the ever-changing landscape. We have to just all be very on our toes in this industry. There's just a lot, and we don't know what the midterms are going to hold. You just have to be. That's why this podcast and so many other resources that Everezi and others push out. It's the best. We've got to stay on top of this every day. Really, it's a constantly evolving landscape for us here in this industry. And that's what makes it fun and that's what makes it challenging. But there's a lot we can't control. There was a time when we could control a lot of stuff. You kind of got to be ready for anything right now.
Yeah. And and I feel like it's also a platform where no matter what side you fall on, whether it's politically or, how you view certain things, within our industry, I feel like we all have the same goal, right? Um, you know, we want to protect our residents, provide good resident experience. We want to provide great operational success as a company for our owners and our owner operators and all of our vendors and everything. And the more information that we have and the more content that we can put out there that, is truth and factual, then the better decisions we can make, as a whole, as an industry. It's hard to make decisions when you don't have the information.
Absolutely. You've heard me say this a million times, but I'm the children of educators. I come from a family of college professors, college administrators, elementary school teachers we're talking decades and decades. And so I love to teach and speak. And to me, we all should learn something every day. I love to learn, right? I think we all do. But every day, like that's every new year, I always say, you're going to keep on learning something new every day. And it may not be in my space right here, maybe about something else. I didn't know that about that country, or I didn't know that about that person, or whatever it might be. But it constantly learning and taking advantage of all the educational resources that exist across, especially this industry. There's so much. We're so lucky to have so much education. And, that's one of the true joys. It's my favorite way of giving back is to, educate and teach and speak. And it's just so important that we all, when we have those opportunities, take them. And also to share, like you two sharing your incredible experiences. You have done so many things in different roles that, let someone else who's maybe thinking of wanting to do what you do or learn from you, have you as a resource. I think regardless of gender, knowing that there's industry resources is just, I love that. Like that's why I love meeting people and, just knowing, hey, you never know when something's going to come up and you're like, wait, I met that person. Let me go, get that contact information. But I love that part. That's truly the best part of my day is when I get to, talk like this or educate. I've actually been on a roll lately. I did a webinar before this. I did a podcast yesterday. So I love it though. It makes me feel
And well, we love having you for sure. And I know next month we're going to be with NARPM at the Day on the Hill in DC. Speaking of legislation, so that conference will be there. So timing is pretty spot on for that conference. So that'll be the first Day on the Hill that I've gone to, and I'm really looking forward to it. I can't wait to hear, the details of everything and just kind of be a part of witnessing that, especially right now with all
absolutely.
conversation.
Yeah, I mean, advocacy is so important no matter what industry you're in. As I shared with you, kind of the other part of my practice aside from property management is litigation within the title space. So title insurance, land title disputes. I just finished a 2.5 year term for the trade organization that mirrors the land title industry, the American Land Title Association, and I was the national advocacy chair. And in that role, I got to go across the country and work with people and help them in getting those issues for that organization. So anytime, even if you're not in a trade or industry organization, anytime you have a problem, you must advocate to your leaders, whether it's on the state, local, or federal level, because it's our absolute right, but our privilege to be able to do so. And just as we might advocate for ourselves or our kids, we're all, I'm always like mama bear if something would have happened to my kids. It's the same concept. If we see something, like if we're concerned about how these definitions in the EO are going to come out, or if we're concerned about, what's going on in the lead-based paint space with EPA, or the other concern I have is with fair housing. There was a removal of a very helpful HUD directive on emotional support animals. Just advocate, bring it to the attention of these individuals who are representing you. So yes, things like if you can ever participate, if you're a realtor on your local Day on the Hill in your state, do it. It's super fun, but it's more than that. It's very not just empowering, but it just brings you kind of back to basics. Like, wow, we have this ability to have our voices heard and actually make a difference. So yeah, I'm thrilled to walk those halls with you in a couple of weeks. It's going to be awesome. Just wear very comfortable shoes. Fashion does not high comfort.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. We all need to get back to realizing that as much as we get frustrated one way or another with the policies that we hear or what we hear coming from the television and all of that from Capitol Hill in general, we need to realize and, respect the fact that it is a privilege that we get to, have these voices and make them known and advocate for whatever it is that we believe in and our, or want within your industry or just your personal day-to-day life in general. It really is a privilege.
Yeah, 100%.
And I'm glad that we have Everesi Media as a platform for sharing our knowledge and learning from wonderful guests like you, Monica. And it gives us all a voice so that we can share, and just really grateful to them for that.
I agree 100%. It's been a wonderful addition to my life getting to know those folks. And I'm just so thrilled to be on and having this conversation. And again, I'm a regular listener, big fan. So, I think just keep on doing this. It makes makes a big difference.
We're really here on board with us today.
It is my absolute pleasure. I loved it. And I will come on anytime to talk about anything because as you see, I can talk. But no, I loved it today. Thank you. And, just to those listeners, I'm please think of me as a resource. I love this industry and am very passionate about seeing things like, when we're dealing with our lead-based paint or fair housing, just being sure that we're always being very robust in our representation of what good services we bring and how, how very conscientious we are of, not just legislation, but, being in a good regulatory space, following our own rules. And so it's just a pleasure to be able to get out there and tell people I'm here if I can help.
Yes. Thank you so much for coming on board with us and sharing with us how that we can be responsible in this space by gathering more information and sharing knowledge, and then also on Capitol Hill where we can make a difference to make it safe for people in their homes.
Thank you, my friend. We appreciate you coming on today.
Thanks, ladies.